Welcome back to Starting Kyle Orton. God, we've been welcomed back to Starting Kyle Orton so often, haven't we, Kyle?
Yeah,
It's become old hat.
Yeah, I mean, I think at this point we can maybe drop the theme of the reboot and just be like, well, I guess we're still saying welcome back to this week's episode. So welcome.
You can never be welcomed back to Kyle Orton enough, I don't think.
That's like welcome back, Cotter. Welcome back, Kyle Orton.
That's right.
Welcome back.
There's always room for a little Kyle Orton in your life.
There is, yeah, absolutely.
Well, what are we talking about tonight, Kyle?
So tonight, Travis, I've thought about it, and since we've come back, we've been a little too rational, I feel. We have had nuanced discussions. We've had statistics backing up every point practically. We've been thoughtful. We've been balanced.
Yeah.
And I think we've earned the trust of the people who've listened to us so far, and I think it's time we burned it. Let's burn the trust down. Let's get rid of the goodwill. Let's be like the rest of sports media. Let's just fire off takes tonight. We're going to cover the defensive players in this draft, and just like a good player on defense, we're going to hit hard, and we're not going to think about it. We're going to fire some takes. So instead of doing it like we did last week when we did offense, where we broke down the position groups, we did who do you like and what's their statistics. No. Tonight, it's time for hot, piping, steaming hot takes. We're going to go point, counterpoint. I'm calling it take off, folks. He's Nicolas Cage, and if you've ever seen Travis, I know we're not a visual podcast, but if you guys have ever seen Travis, the resemblance to Nicolas Cage is actually pretty strong. He's Cage, I'm Travolta. We are facing off in the take zone. We're going to fire off some takes about the defensive players in this draft. So, am I doing take one? You want to do take one? Who wants to fire off first?
I think you should go first. That was such a stirring introduction.
All right, hot take number one. The take coming in. I think, just maybe, Nolan Smith is the best edge rusher, edge prospect in this draft. And that's a hot take because Will Anderson is the anointed one. And I know we'll come back to Will Anderson later. And I like Will Anderson. But I watched this Nolan Smith fella. And he had a record-setting 40 time for a defensive end. And you're like, Kyle, that doesn't fucking matter. He's not running 40.
Wasn't it 4.39 or something?
4.39.
That's disgusting.
Johnny Knox speed at defensive end. I know what you're saying. I know what you're saying, you sons of bitches. You're saying he's a defensive end. What defensive end is running 40 yards? You're right. But still, there's speed there. There is quickness. And I know what else you're saying. Yeah, of course he's fast, because he's too goddamn small to be a defensive end. And to you, anonymous person, or maybe to Travis, maybe Travis is thinking that, I'm saying fuck off, because this man is explosive, he's got a great first step, and he can defend the run. He can set the edge. He played almost all of his snaps over tackle at Georgia. He was not an off-ball guy. He was lined up over the tackle. A lot of times his hand was in the dirt, and he set the edge. He has a run defense grade of over 90 for the last 2 years from Pro Football Focus. Despite his size, he can get after it. He can set the edge. He can get around your tackle. He can blow up your running play. And by God, with that speed, he can get to the quarterback. He had a pass rush win rate of 25.5%. That is outstanding, and it's even higher than Will Anderson, who is the gold standard in this draft as a pass rusher. So I have to say, we'll talk about the Bears next week and what we think they should do, and I think we both want them really to lock down an offensive tackle in this first round. But if they were to stay at 9 and they were to go defense, the guy that would make me the least mad, unless Jalen Carter falls, the guy that would make me the least mad is if Nolan Smith's there. And people are saying he's too small to be a 4-3 end. But you know what? When I watch this guy, the guy I think of is the dude used to play for the Indianapolis Colts long before Eberflus was there, but back when they were nonetheless running a Tampa 2-style defense, Robert Mathis. Same height. I think Mathis at the Combine weighed about 4 pounds more than Nolan Smith weighed in. And Robert Mathis was just a relentless pain in the ass to offensive tackles for over a decade in the NFL, and when I watch Nolan Smith and I try to project him into a 4-3 defense like the Bears have, that's who I see. And I think on third downs, on pass rushing downs, if you didn't want the guy to have his hand in the dirt anyways, you don't have to ask him to do that. It's 2023, 4-3, 3-4. It doesn't matter as much as it used to. You can ask a guy to rush sometimes just straight out of stand-up position if that's where he's most comfortable in an obvious passing down. And I think Nolan Smith can be that guy. I'm betraying the purpose of the take a little bit because I do really like Will Anderson, and I don't know that I say this with 100% conviction, but the more I watch Nolan Smith, the more I love him, and the more I think, at the very least, if you don't take Will Anderson as an edge rusher, you've got to take Nolan Smith. And there's some other guys we're going to talk about later, but Nolan Smith's that guy.
Yeah,
you got to take on my take?
I will take off your take. I wish we could argue more about your hot take, but I actually completely agree with you. Inside Baseball, a few days, like 6 days ago, I texted you and I said, so what's the issue with Nolan Smith? I was trying to get you to give me, like last week you had your list of wide receivers who were smaller than a certain height and lighter than a certain, not as fast as a certain guy. And I was like, is there something for like Nolan Smith? Is he just too small? Is there no way he's going to work? And you were like, no, fuck you. He's definitely going to work. Look at Hassan Reddick. Look at Bob Mathis. And the reason I asked is because he is an absolute monster. You talked about that 4.39 speed. He doesn't just have that top-end speed. He has explosiveness, and he uses it, man. One of the things I'm going to talk about a lot, because, can you believe it, a lot of our takes are about defensive linemen, is functional strength. So sure, you're a big guy, but can you use it in a way that throws people off guards? Do you have a strong bull rush? Can you fight guys off of you when you get locked up, when you're blocking on the line? Nolan is never locked up. This is a dude who is always fighting. He can beat you right off the snap, but he can also beat you with a juke move, with his speed. He gets around you inside or to the outside. He never stops working, and he just overwhelms tackles. And it's something that I don't see from other defensive ends in this draft. And you'll notice I'm going to let Will Anderson hang. I'm going to let him hang there out in the ether for a little bit.
Yeah. So I'm glad that you mentioned Hassan Reddick, because that is exactly my fear that someone is going to do with Nolan Smith. Because Hassan Reddick was drafted in the first round by the Arizona Cardinals, and because he was small, he was 237 pounds, Nolan Smith's 238, so it's a great comparison. The Arizona Cardinals got in their heads that they needed to make this guy like a flex player. They moved him inside, they moved him outside. And he only rushed each of his first 3 seasons in the NFL. He only got about 150 pass rush snaps. Okay? And it wasn't working out. He was not good enough in coverage. He was not good enough as an off-the-ball linebacker. And he wasn't getting enough opportunities as a pass rusher to really show what he could do. Finally, in the 4th year of his first-round contract, they didn't even pick up his 5th-year option. They'd already given up on him. They were like, you know what? Fine. Let's just let him go back to what he did in college, even though he's too small. Let's just let him rush the passer. And what did he do? He had 11 goddamn sacks, and he was a relentless pass rusher. And the Cardinals had already declined his 5th-year option. They had to let him walk. The Panthers signed him to a 1-year deal because I think a lot of people were like, this guy's still small. Maybe this was a fluke. He's only got 1 year of production. And what did he do with the Panthers? He got 13 goddamn sacks because they let him rush the passer. And then the Eagles, being smart, being run with the best GM in football, Howie Roseman, like we mentioned last week, these were the guys to finally lock this dude up to a multi-year deal. And what did he do? He was a relentless, damn near 20 sacks, was just a relentless pass rusher, part of one of the best pass rushing units we have ever seen in history. And Hassan Reddick is exactly the guy I want to bring up with Nolan Smith, because I fear someone's going to look at the size and they're going to say, let's play him as a tweener. Let's use him sometimes pass rush, sometimes in coverage. Kind of like Phil Emery back in the day, like the Bears did with Shea McClellan, and it was a horrible disaster. I think if you draft Nolan Smith, whether you run a 3-4, whether you run a 4-3, don't do the tweener shit. Just set him on the edge, let him play the position he's played in college, and let him get his ass after the quarterback, because he can do it. I'm not worried about the weight at all. This guy's strong, this guy's fast. Like I said, Robert Mathis is the 4-3 end that he reminded me of. Hassan Reddick is another guy, and a 3-4 edge rusher that he reminds me of. Just let him do his job, let him get after the quarterback, let him go for it. That's my take. So Nolan, I guess, I don't know that, given everything that Will Anderson is able to do, I don't know that I can truly make Nolan Smith the number one edge rusher for me, but he's the clear number two, and I don't think he is for a lot of people. But if you're taking defensive linemen in the top 10 of this draft, I'm comfortable with Mark Anderson, I'm comfortable with Jalen Carter, and I am comfortable with Will Anderson. Those are the three.
Well, what a Freudian slip. You mean you're comfortable with Nolan Smith, not Mark Anderson, right?
Will Anderson, Nolan Smith. Mark Anderson... we're talking about a defensive end named Anderson. I think as a Bears fan, it's impossible.
Too many Andersons. Let's be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Travis, now you're up. You're in the take zone.
So I agree with you about Nolan Smith. It's just that I think he's the best defensive end. I think there are two dudes above him on the defensive line, neither of which is an edge rusher. And I'm talking about Jalen Carter. I don't need to waste much time talking about Jalen Carter. I think we all know exactly why he's the best defensive prospect.
I don't think there's any hot take about Jalen Carter.
No, but being good. My number two, after watching all the goddamn tape this week, and I don't understand why he's not number two on everybody's board, is Kalijah Kancey, defensive tackle out of Pittsburgh.
So wait, just to clarify for the good people, you are saying Kalijah Kancey is not your number two ranked DT, or defensive tackle, which I think a lot of people have him necessarily as the number two defensive tackle. You're saying, out of all the defensive linemen in this draft, and it's a deep defensive line draft, you're saying Kalijah Kancey is your number two overall. It's Jalen Carter, and then it's Kalijah Kancey. If you had the choice, you'd take this man.
That is correct, 100%. Let me tell you why.
That's takeage. That's why we're here. Go for it. I want to take. Pour it on me.
Big deal about Will Anderson. The reason you want Will Anderson, Will is the perfect technician. He has ideal technique. He has every trick in his bag. You don't take him because he's got the biggest size. You don't take him because he's the fastest guy on the field. You take him because he is already fully polished as an NFL pass rusher, and I would agree with that. Kalijah Kancey, when I watched him, seems to have exactly as many moves, if not more, and he's willing to use them all at different times. If you look at a guy like Lucas Van Ness, we're not going to talk about him too much just yet, but he's a dude who basically just has one move. He's going to run straight at you and hope he tackles somebody, right? And that's very common for a college rusher. Coming off the edge or coming off the inside, they don't usually have that polish. Kalijah Kancey, if you look at every sack he had this season and you compare it to every sack Lucas Van Ness had, Van Ness, they were either just the product of a guy not blocking him or it was the product of him bull rushing. Kancey showed off every different move you can have. He speed rushed people. He's bull rushed dudes into guys. One of his sacks, he grabs the center, throws him into the guard, swim moves over him, and then sacks the quarterback. He has I don't even know what to call it. I'm sure there's a technical term for it, but he's so quick with his hands. He can knife his hand in there at the stab, get it underneath a guy's armpit, and swim move underneath them so much faster than a center or guard can react that he's already beyond them. He has so many tackles for loss where he uses this move. It's not quite a swim. It's just this. It's the explosion off the ball. It's the speed that comes from this guy. And that's going to be one of the big knocks against him, right? Why is he fast? Well, he's an undersized defensive tackle, right? He's going to eat basically the same argument that Nolan Smith is going to have against him. This guy is too small to play the position. This guy is going to get worked in the NFL. Here's my issue with that.
And to be fair, I do think it's a bit more of an issue to be undersized inside than on the edge. And this is a defensive tackle.
I could see the argument. But let me tell you what people always say about an oversized defensive tackle. A guy like Jalen Carter. What's the big thing, Kyle? You've been reading all these reports. What do they say? They say they have a problem getting enough leverage because they're too damn tall and they don't get down enough so that they can get leverage on these offensive tackles because they're just too damn big. Then you get a guy who's perfectly sized, 6'2" like Kancey is, and they're like, you know what? He's just not tall enough. I don't know. Sure, he has great leverage on every snap, but is he just too small in the NFL? Here's my counter to that. This dude can throw around 80 center and guard. He has functional strength coming out the butt. This dude is pushing people back on every single play. Unlike the other defensive tackle prospects in this draft, the guy after him is probably going to be Breezy. That dude hasn't moved a single center or guard that I've seen in the entire time he's been at Clemson. This dude's playing in the ACC and he doesn't get movement on the line. Kancey gets movement on every single goddamn play. And you know what the benefit of having a dude like him, who's a little bit quote-unquote undersized at defensive tackle is? You can move this guy outside. And I think he has a future as a guy who's going to move inside, he's going to move outside, and either way, he's going to stop the run, he's going to get to your quarterback. He already has the goddamn bag of tricks. I saw no holes in his game. The only holes I can find are that, allegedly, he's just too small. And if that's the only thing, you know what? I'm taking that guy.
Yeah, so to back up us,
give it to me.
We talked about pass rush win rate with Nolan Smith and how 25.5% is ridiculous. Kalijah Kancey's pass rush win rate was 22.7%.
So higher than Will Anderson's still, right?
Higher than Will Anderson's, but again, I mean, I would argue that 22.7% from an interior pass rusher is more impressive than 25% from an edge rusher. That is some serious disruption. And also to your point, I mean, he had an 80.9 grade against the run this year from Pro Football Focus. So, I mean, he didn't lose at the point of attack too much in college. But that's the concern, because the counterpoint that I would bring up with Kancey, the reason that I would be concerned with Kancey, because the pro that's being brought up with Kancey a lot is the same guy who played the same position at the same college at Pitt back in the day, and was also fell to pick number 13, not to pick number 14 though in that draft. God damn it, one more pick. I feel so bad for Kyle Fuller.
It's not his fault.
How many times do you draft a guy who literally made an all-pro team at corner and is remembered as a disappointing pick? Not really, because he really wasn't a disappointing pick. It still feels like a disappointment because they were one pick away from Aaron Donald.
Do you remember that draft day and us just texting each other just the saddest sigh?
Do I remember? I couldn't forget.
Why?
I think I remember both of us texting each other, fuck you, Jeff
How could
Fisher, the minute that pick was made. But yeah, no. Anyways, but he's compared to Aaron Donald because Aaron Donald also was a little undersized and was just a monster at Pitt. And he's not built the same as Donald. He's more slight than Donald is. He's not as raw. I mean, we will never... I hesitate to name anyone, to compare anyone to Aaron Donald, because Aaron Donald is like the greatest... if you ignore positional value, folks, if you ignore obviously quarterbacks are more important than anyone else. If you ignore positional value, there is an argument for Aaron Donald as literally the best football player that has ever walked the earth. You know how people get bored with Mike Trout in baseball and they don't vote him MVP every year, even though
they should? No, I know what you're saying. Yeah.
In the NFL, if people didn't get bored with it, Aaron Donald would have been the defensive player of the year basically every year of his career. So it's not fair to compare this guy to Aaron Donald, because that's an unfair comparison to everybody. But I will say he's not built like Aaron Donald. I don't think he's going to be quite as strong. And I do think he'll struggle with the double and the triple teams a little bit more than Aaron Donald has. So I do feel like the more similar case is a guy that we kind of mentioned as a potential trade target for the Bears, which is Ed Oliver. And that was the last guy to get the next Aaron Donald label. And it's kind of been a curse for him, because Ed Oliver's been a solid defensive tackle. He does disrupt. He gets pressure. But I mean, every you talk to anyone in Buffalo, they just want to get rid of him. They hate the guy. They're disappointed because they were promised the next Aaron Donald, and they got, just a pretty good defensive tackle. And so I worry about that with Kancey a little bit, because we said a lot of these things about Ed Oliver, and he has had trouble consistently translating that dominance he showed on the college field with that size to the NFL. So that's my one concern there. But I mean, the thing I would say about that is, Ed Oliver. If you could give me Ed Oliver in the back half of the first round, I'd take him. So that's where I feel about Kancey. I'm not as in love with this man as you are. I wouldn't love it if the Bears took him at 9. But I do think he's promising enough to be a first round pick for sure.
Yeah, I think so. I did see the Ed Oliver comparisons, and I kind of understand that. I think it's unfair to compare anyone to Aaron Donald because it's sort of like saying, "Well, you're not as strong as Brock Lesnar" or something like that. It's just a genetic freak show out there that is probably never going to be replicated again. You get one Aaron Donald every 20 years, and then you just say like, "Wow, thank God that like I didn't know you could put that many muscles on a man. I didn't know you could have muscles that dense." And then you just think about it, in your dreams. Do you think about Aaron Donald in your dreams? I do. Anyway.
I mean, have you seen that
yeah,
without a shirt on? It's
anyway, so I thought about Ed Oliver. I went back and watched some of his stuff. And I think the difference is the technique. Cansey, to me, has such a well-developed technique that goes so far beyond what I've heard from other scouts at this point. That I think he's already at that level where you think Ed Oliver might be this year or next year, right?
Yeah, the most encouraging thing about him is that he is super fast for a guy that plays the position he's in, but I don't think that's the only thing he relies on. He knows how to use his hands, he has an array of moves, and that's actually why I do think the fallback plan for Cansey, and the reason he really intrigues me, is I think this is a dude that if he does kind of struggle inside, I think he's a guy that could actually transition outside and play the edge, because a great comp someone made recently was Melvin Ingram, who kind of, when he was at South Carolina, he kind of played inside more often than he played outside in the NFL. He moved inside and out, but eventually he kind of made his home at edge rusher, especially as he got older, because let's face it, the knees don't bend like they used to after a certain amount of time. I think we've all been there. But yeah, Melvin Ingram built very similarly to Kalijah Cansey. So, I mean, if you're going to tell me the worst case scenario is that I got to move this guy off of defensive tackle and just get Melvin Ingram on the edge,
and I want to be clear. I think, specifically if the Bears draft him, I know we're going to talk about it next week. He's definitely an option out there if they trade back, as some rumors have suggested they might again. I think the plan would absolutely be to move him inside and out. I don't think he stays the 3 technique for an entire game. I think, we've got DeMarcus Walker because we want to move him inside and out. We just signed Green because we want to move him inside and out. I think if we do draft Cansey, it tells us exactly what the Bears' plan is, right? We're going to move a bunch of guys to the 3 technique, to outside, and they're going to switch on and off over and over and over again. And Cansey is absolutely the ideal to do that sort of thing in this draft.
Yeah. All right, so I think I'm ready to move on to the next.
Dude, go for it. Burn me.
My take, the guy that I have seen some people take top 5, I have seen almost everyone take top 10, that I'm scared to even take top 20, is Tyree Wilson.
All right. Tech.
This man is a profile that he has a profile that always scares me. He is the dude who is the physical freak edge rusher who, to be frank, did not produce in college. Now, he's a little bit better than some of the guys I'm thinking of, because I do think he had a fairly solid final year in college. This year he was pretty good. That pass rush win percentage that we talked about, he was at 22.6%. But other than that, he was basically not even a good player until this year. He's an older prospect. He's almost 23. When you're talking about, and which, it's great. The NFL draft is hilarious because you will say stuff like, he's almost 23, he's an older prospect. But it's true. A lot of times you're talking about guys nowadays who are entering the draft at 20, 21 years old.
Yeah, dude, we just signed, right? Tremaine Edmonds was 19.
Yeah, this is a dude, so I question how much of his breakout this year was because he really figured things out, and how much of it was just that he was a little bit older than the guys he was facing, and he is a physical freak. And when I watch Tyree Wilson, I see a dude who doesn't really have a huge arsenal of pass rushing moves. He is a dude who used his speed and his length and his size to just kind of bully college tackles. And we know that doesn't work as well in the NFL. We know you have to develop the moves in the NFL. And we know that this is hard because this was the exact same debate people were having last year with Trayvon Walker, whom the Jaguars took number 1 overall. And the Pro Football Focus guys said, this is not the profile of a guy who usually develops into a great pass rusher in the NFL. Maybe can develop into an okay one. and combined with solid run defense can provide value that way, but really not a guy that, I mean, you take an edge rusher in the top 10, you're wanting a perennial, you're wanting a guy that gives you double-digit sacks every year, let's be honest. You're wanting Khalil Mack. You are not wanting, I don't know, who was it? Jermaine Graham or something like that. You don't want to you don't want Alex, we loved Alex Brown. You don't want Alex Brown top 10. You're not wanting a guy who gives you 5 or 6 effort sacks and plays solid against the run. And that's, Tyree Wilson has a very similar and kind of in some ways analytically worse profile than Trayvon did. In Trayvon's rookie year with the Jaguars, he was kind of exactly what this analytics warned he would be. He made some good plays against the run. He was often non-existent as a pass rusher. He was. And that's what I fear with Tyree Wilson. You're going to draft this guy super high, and he's just not going to get a lot of sacks. And the guy that the guys that I'm reminded of that we talked about like this in the past were, like Barkevious Mingo coming out of LSU or Deion Jordan coming out of Oregon. You heard all these things about their length and their strength and their speed and they're raw, but there is a high bust percentage with these guys that are like, no, he didn't get a lot of sacks in college. He didn't get a lot of pressures in college, but he just needs to learn the moves, and we'll teach that. You can't coach his raw ability. And history says most of the time, like, they don't coach it. You can't teach that. Like, guy has to have some kind of innate. So he's like the anti-Cansey, if you will. You're talking about Cansey doesn't have the length, doesn't have the physical tools necessarily or the ideal size for the position, but he's already comes equipped with a full pass rush arsenal of moves. Tyree Wilson, I just don't see the arsenal of moves. I really don't. And that scares me. I'm not saying he's not worth a first-round pick. I think you do bet on tools like that in the back half of the first round because, I mean, you chase pass rush ability, and I mean, there's like 1 or 2 guys per draft that enter with size, speed, and pass rush moves. Those guys always go top 10. I get it. You're going to have to take some chances later. But, where we're talking where the Bears might be drafting, especially top 10 teams, top 15 teams, I'd be wary. I really would. And I think the NFL kind of feels the same because this is a guy that was like universally being mocked in the top 5 a little while ago, and I've started to hear this time closer to the draft season, the real boards start to leak out a little bit, and I keep seeing him consistently moving farther and farther down mocks. And we heard from from a source. I really don't like to brag that we have sources. I do hear things from time to time. I am not connected or cool, I promise you. But I've heard that Ryan Poles is really not huge. I guess not on Tyree Wilson, but on another guy that we'll talk about a little bit. But I know Ryan Poles is not huge on this kind of profile, I don't think, of the guys who... We know Ryan Poles values analytics, and if the analytics are saying, like, guys who don't get a lot of pressures and disruptions in college don't tend to get them in the NFL, probably scares you off that guy a little bit. So yeah, Tyree Wilson is a dude that I see a lot of people just take as a slam dunk top 10 pick. I don't know that I'd do it. I really don't.
I guess to piggyback off that, you want to talk about another guy who's like Tyree Wilson, although...
Yeah, let's go straight into, because these two are they are two of a kind.
Yeah. You almost can't talk about one without talking about the other at this point.
No, because it's the same. Yeah, the same. So, anyways, I'll let you take it because this is your guy, and I know we've got friends and family who listen to the show, so they're Hawkeyes fans just like you. So this is your anime betrayal moment.
Yeah.
Say it out loud.
And I will. This is going to take me a little bit to explain. You got to give me a little time, but I promise I'll wrap back around to it. Okay, so my guy, as you guys know, I'm an Iowa Hawkeye fan, and my biggest bust in this draft, I think, is going to be Lucas Van Ness. I was stunned when I saw that he was up on boards. Absolutely shocked. I think the first time I saw him mocked in the first round, I texted it out to Kyle, and I was like, wow, must be a shit draft for defensive linemen. And here's why. I think this is relevant because I think the Bears are trending this way this year on defense. The way the Iowa Hawkeyes run their defense is they have a very strong back seven, strong pass coverage. They have a great secondary, and they have linebackers who cover a lot of ground. They want to force you to throw the ball in there. They want turnovers. That's the whole goal because their offense ain't scoring, right? So what the defensive line's job is to stop the run and to capitalize on coverage sacks when they present themselves. But it is not to disrupt and then make it so the quarterback can't throw into that back seven. That is not the point. Lucas Van Ness is one of many Iowa defensive linemen who moves around and has that job. He plays inside mostly. He played outside some. I can tell you that if you watch every sack that Lucas had this year, the guy who you will think is Lucas Van Ness half the time is the other guy whose last name starts with Van on the Iowa defensive line, Van Valkenburg. It is not Lucas Van Ness, because most of Lucas's sacks are the result of chance. Coverage was good. Sorry, man, like the center took too long, the quarterback ran right into him and something like that. Or his sacks came against Kent State, or his sack will come against Nevada, or something like that. I think the way I've seen it described best is he is a guy who flashes, and you'll see this with a lot of different defensive end prospects in the draft. He flashes. Oh, man, he's going to have a really impressive play, but he actually disappears for the rest of the game. And that's true. He doesn't get a lot of push on the inside. He doesn't lose ground, but he doesn't get a lot of push by himself. When he's in the run game, he doesn't get into the backfield, but he does hold his ground. He's a sturdy guy. The deal with him and the deal with Tyree Wilson is when you meet them in person, when you see them up close, they look like they were chiseled out of stone. Lucas's nickname this entire time has been Hercules because he looks like a Greek god. It's not a joke. That's what he looks like. But when you see how it translates on the field, he doesn't have, remember this word, functional strength. He does not show what he appears to have while he is playing the game of football. He doesn't do this stuff on his own because it's not asked of him at Iowa. So what you're hoping is, with Lucas, is that he can capitalize on his genetic gifts, that he can capitalize on his freakish stature and actually do something in the NFL with it. And I don't want to gamble on that in the top 10. Like you said, Kyle, late first round, early second round, that's the sweet spot for this kind of prospect to me. I don't want to say that Lucas is not a prospect. That's not the case. But you don't take this guy in the top 10 because, kind of like you were just saying with Tyree, it's the kind of guy who gets 6 sacks, 6.5 sacks, like he had this year at Iowa, through basically no fault of his own. Something just happened.
Yeah. I mean, and you didn't even mention the main thing with Luca Van Ness that concerns a lot of people. And I mean, not every college staff utilizes its players perfectly, but this man didn't start.
Mm-hmm.
He did not start. He was not the starter. This is a guy that already, like, his own coaching staff didn't see him as an every down player. So I question a guy who was basically a pass rushing specialist in college. First of all, he has the lowest of all the guys we've talked about so far. He had the lowest pass rush win rate too, as well, at 18.8%. So a pass rushing specialist who isn't necessarily an elite pass rushing specialist already. Like I said, it's mostly projection. You're looking at the body type, and something else you brought up too. And I don't know how much stock people want to put into this, but if you look at Pro Football Focus by game, his best games are who are the Jackrabbits? Is that South Dakota State? Is that who they played this year? South Dakota State, Nevada. He did play fairly well against Iowa State, but this wasn't the best Iowa State team we've had in a while. And then otherwise, his other best games, and not that they were even super highly rated, were like Wisconsin, Nebraska, an emaciated Kentucky team that we know has a horrible offensive line just from talking about.
Yeah, they rested a bunch of people.
And they rested a bunch of people. He was awful. He was pretty bad against Michigan, Illinois, Ohio State. Was completely erased by Skoronski against Northwestern. Was really bad against Minnesota.
Yeah.
So, I mean, disappeared, basically, just like you were saying. It disappeared in every big game they had. It's projection. I mean, and then people always kind of, the draft is always projection. And that's true. But there are certain guys you feel like you're projecting more with. And Van Ness and Tyree Wilson, both of them are guys that they don't come to the NFL with a full toolbox. And to be fair, sometimes these guys do work out. The one I keep pointing to is Ziggy Ansah.
Sure.
And Rashawn Gary has developed into a very nice pass rusher for the Packers, much as I'm loath to say. And that was a guy that everyone talked about him at the draft as like a freak, and he was all these skills. And I was like, Michigan has a great defensive coaching staff. I mean, Jim Harbaugh is a fucking weirdo, but you got to say that Wolverines, they coach defense pretty well these days. And they couldn't get anything out of Rashawn Gary. So I was always like, I'm really thinking the Green Bay Packers are going to do this. But they did. And Ziggy Ansah was a dude that didn't have a lot of sacks in college, but he developed into a pretty good pass rusher there for a few years in the NFL. So it can work. It's just, to me, there's a lot more risk in these Greek god guys with questionable production versus maybe some guys that have one or two question marks, like size-wise, like Kancey or Nolan Smith, but fucking rush the shit out of the passer.
Yeah, and I think the other thing about Ziggy, which really needs to be said, because that's also the guy that comes to mind with me, a genetic freak who maybe you're like, I don't know, does he have a bag of tricks? Ziggy hadn't seen a fucking football until he got to BYU. He didn't play football, so you were actually projecting that as this guy learns the position, he's like a 4-year-old in football terms. So that's not the case with Lucas Van Ness. This dude's been playing football since he was 8. You know, like you either have it or you don't at this point, I think. And he and Tyree Wilson, neither of them have shown that they have it. And man, I don't want to take that risk in the top 10 to see if they'll get it in the NFL.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I think that's the hot take on the and I think in 2023 this old football scout axiom is a little problematic, but they're an old scouting phrase has been used for a long time, and that I'm most associated with it with Vernon Golston. Looks like Tarzan, plays like Jane.
Yeah.
That's the phrase I just can't shake with some of these guys. Where if the only great things you have to say about a prospect are about how he looks the part, how he fits the profile, he's prototypical size, prototypical this, but I'm like, but what did he do? Yeah, I just got attacked by my cat. Hello, folks. Yeah,
hi,
say
Attila.
hello to Attila the cat. He's a son of a bitch.
Yeah, but no, what you were saying is basically, the same thing I've been saying. It's functional strength. Stop looking at how big they are. Stop looking at how tall and how fat they are, and look at how they use it. And Lucas, he doesn't use it right. And Tyree, the only thing he can do is use it. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, that's tight. Yeah, so the Pro Football Focus, Mike Renner's draft, one of his negatives about Tyree is he says, he's like, does not always have a plan. And that's basically it. Like, you see a guy who has just relied on, like, I'm the biggest, strongest, tallest motherfucker, and I will push you over. And, I mean, sometimes that's going to work in the NFL, but, like, we know that you're going to have more in your arsenal than that. And I'm always questionable.
Like, you're playing an all-star team of left tackles. There are only 32 left tackles in the NFL. You are getting, the 4 best left tackles from every year, if that, And you're a guy, you can't bowl those guys over. Those are the same guys. Like you said, quality of competition. Those are the guys that stuffed you. And they are everywhere now.
Yeah, and Skoronski, I mean, completely erased him. He was
you brought up Minnesota, it's John Michael Schmitz. It's the same thing. It's just you're going away with those guys.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to move in. You put the knife in Luca Van Ness. You took down your Hawkeye. I'm gonna put one. I'm going to meet your sacrifice.
I'm stunned by this.
I'm going to say it hurts me because I love Devin Witherspoon. He was the best thing about watching the 2022 Fighting Illini. I love Devin Witherspoon's tape. So many people say he's got like the best tape of any corners put out there in 4 or 5, 6 years. I love Devin Witherspoon. I also worry about Devin Witherspoon because I think this man has a little Bob Sanders in him. And what that means, if you remember Bob Sanders, and I know Travis does, he's a Hawkeye legend, and he was an outstanding safety for the Indianapolis Colts when he played. But if you'll remember, he didn't play very often because this man threw himself at ball carriers with reckless abandon, no instinct whatsoever for self-preservation. And the number one thing I like about Devin Witherspoon is the thing that scares the shit out of me. Devin Witherspoon will kick your ass. He will take it to you on every snap. He will erase the flats. He is not afraid to level and throw a shoulder into a running back. He's not afraid to take on a tight end. He will jam you. He will fight you. I never saw a wide receiver who looked like he was having a good time matched up against Devin Witherspoon. He has that mentality that I want defensive backs to have. I want my corners to be just complete pricks. I do. Like, you can tell that Chauncey Gardner-Johnson now of the Lions, goddammit. You can tell that he just makes everyone mad. Like, he drives you insane. And that's what I like about Devin Witherspoon. But I'm going to say this about Devin Witherspoon. He weighed in at the Combine at... Hold on, Devin... What was it?
Oh, some ASMR in here. Getting that keyboard typing going on, huh?
He weighed in at 181 pounds. The other top corner in this draft, for example, Christian Gonzalez, weighed in at 201. Sauce Gardner, the top corner last year, 201. So he's like 20 pounds lighter than an average cornerback, especially an average top-tier cornerback. And a lot of people think this means he's going to have to be confined to the nickel in the NFL, which in and of itself is, again, not a bad thing. But it's a place where you're taking on ball carriers and you're plowing through traffic. And I do worry that the intensity and the recklessness and the hate in his heart, I do worry it might betray him down the road in a slowly trickling series of shoulder injuries, head injuries, etc. Because he just plays with such violence that you love, and then you pause for a second and you go, but do we initiate some contact that maybe some corners who are making business decisions would avoid? So I don't know that it would scare me off of taking this guy high. I mean, he's so good. The tape is so incredible. But I do worry about his longevity precisely because of how aggressively he plays.
That is, I mean, I can't exactly argue with that take because really all you're saying is, you know, I love him, but I think he's going to get hurt, which is probably true because, yeah, I mean, we talked about Marvin Mims last week, and I love that guy because of how vicious he is in run blocking. Like, he wants to hit somebody. Witherspoon definitely reminds you of Bob Sanders, and, yeah, the same thing as Marvin Mims. He seems to want to hurt people. He is not scared to fly at someone and just launch himself like a missile into them until they explode into dust. And I love him for it, but it should be said, too, his coverage skills are absolutely off the charts. I don't think I ever saw him get beat.
No, he's incredible. I will put on my tinfoil hat and say the only bad game I saw him have was when the fucking Michigan refs were throwing a flag every time he breathed on a wide receiver. But, yeah, no, I mean, as far as the player goes, as far as the tape goes, as far as the coverage ability goes, as far as the speed goes, I'm all about Devin Witherspoon. I worry about the size.
Yeah.
And I do think the only thing I do worry about, the other thing I do worry about with him as far as on the field stuff go is I do think he's such an instinctual player, and that's what allows him to play the way he plays, and he's very smart. I do worry that in the NFL, he actually is maybe a little bit physically overmatched, and I do think if he, you know, that's not going to give him quite the same edge that it gave him in college to make up for maybe being a step or two behind or not being as big or as strong as the guys he's going up against. So I do think he's a smart player, and he's going to have to be, I think, to make up for some of the limitations of his size.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we can piggyback off this and talk a little about the corners. I guess I have one corner hot take. I do think the two guys who are at the top of this draft as far as corners are the only two guys with the potential to be real number one corners in this draft. I think Gonzalez is basically perfect. He can't really play the run very well, but who gives a shit? Witherspoon obviously is fantastic. Like I said, I don't think I ever saw him get beat. He's just on people like glue, and he loves to hit people. I understand if he's going to be your number one corner, he's going to be up against a lot of 6'4" guys, and that's going to be a problem for him. And a lot of guys with a lot more muscle than he has, and that will be a problem for him. But like you said, he's such a smart player, I think he can get past it. I think the only guy in the next tier of corners in this draft who could be a solid, reliable starting corner is Joey Porter's kid. Like, just really weirdly long arms on this guy. Kind of scares me. But he's also just great in coverage. He's not, like, super fast or anything, but he seems to always be in the right place. The one I don't understand is the Maryland kid, Banks. Watching tape of that guy, I don't fucking get it. I don't see anything in him at all. Like, I see him getting beat. He got smoked by Ohio State. It didn't matter who lined up against him. He got shook off. He got run past. He got tossed off. It was disturbing. And we talked about the high level of competition. How do you do against the best possible dudes? He looked like a dumpster fire out there. And you look at him play other games, and he's okay, but he's not the kind of guy. He's not even a Joey Porter Jr. In that I don't even think he's going to be a strong second option on your team. I just don't see it. So there you go. If you want a hot take from me, I think the Banks kid is going to be out of the league in 3 years.
Oh, man. I actually really like
There you go. We got one. We got one, dude. We finally got one we disagree on.
He forces a lot. He had a lot of passes defense. He had a lot of forced incompletions. He ranked really high there. He's got good speed.
Oh, this is great. We haven't disagreed on anything this year. I'm so excited.
I mean, he only allowed a completion percentage against of 43%. That's pretty impressive to me. And if you're picking on the guy for struggling against Ohio State, I guess.
I watched here. Let me put it this way: I watched Joey Porter play against Ohio State, and he shut down Marvin Harrison Jr. So
I like Deonte Banks, and he's tall. He's pretty tall for a corner, and he's fast. I mean, he ran like a 4.
He's really going to stick out when he misses all those assignments. There you go.
Man. You just fucking... I wasn't even prepared for this. You didn't go over this in the notes. You just fucking hammered my guy for 10 minutes before I was able to say it. I like Deontay
you're fucking
Banks. Welcome. He's I think he's corner 3 for me.
Jesus.
Gonzalez and Witherspoon.
All right, write this one down. We got one. We got one for the future, man.
All right.
I don't think he cuts the mustard.
Take it to the Banks, if you will. Travis does not like
That's
Deontay. Right. I was like, damn it. I've seen people underrate this Deontay fellow. He'd be a good second-round corner option for the Bears, maybe.
Throw him out. Dude, see, here's the deal, man. I've been taking heat on Twitter the last couple weeks for some of my takes, all right? I think my Justin Herbert one got a lot of context, but I know this one's going to get me. Someone is going to give you a tweet that's like, this guy doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about Banks.
I mean, maybe I'm alone in the woods. I like Deontay Banks, but yeah, I'm trying to look for the stat. He plays aggressive. I like him.
In the meantime, do you want me to finally talk about Will Anderson?
Yeah, you're gonna finish. You're gonna take us out with, I think, your hottest take of them all. So by
well,
God.
Now to be fair, I'm not saying Will Anderson is a bad football player. I'm saying I have some concerns relative to the 3 guys I would put ahead of him. We already know who those are. It's Jalen Carter, it's Kalijah Kancey, and it's Nolan Smith. And my reasoning is thus: Will is the ideal technician. He has every single tool in his bag. He is the Home Depot of defensive technique on the line. He will find a way to get around you, or he will get through you. He's going to try everything. There is nothing that he can't do. Except when he runs into a tackle like Darnell Wright, who we are going to talk a lot about next week, and I know this has come up a lot on the internet, so I'm sure people are pretty familiar with this. When Will Anderson came up against Darnell this season, he didn't just get shut out, he got deleted. It was like Will Anderson did not exist. And all Darnell had to do was stand there and wait for an attack. That's it. Because the one thing Will Anderson does not have is a threatening bull rush. If you are going up against a strong enough tackle, his bull rush is worthless. He does not have the strength to push a guy over, and Darnell Wright knew that. So what he did was he said, I'm either going to get beat to my left or to my right, so I'm going to let him come to me. I'm basically going to play like I'm guarding him in basketball, and I'm going to let him stay off of me until he has to engage. And once he engages, a guy like Darnell Wright, who has functional strength that is off the charts, just held him in place. And that was it for Will Anderson. His day was done. It got so bad that by the end of the game, Will was simply backing off and deciding to become an extra passer. He would kind of rush in. If he was going to get blocked, he just backed off. He got completely destroyed by this guy. Now, this is a guy I like a lot. I like Darnell Wright a whole lot. We're going to talk a lot about Darnell Wright next week. But this is the level of dude that he is going to see in the NFL at right tackle and at left tackle. It's going to be a big dude with a lot of functional strength. And if they know that you can't bull rush them, you're in a lot of trouble. You have to have that in your bag. We talk about Tyree and like how much of a concern he is because he only has a bull rush. The opposite can be true. If
you don't think Anderson?
If you can't run through a guy and everybody knows that it's a non-threat, then you could get stonewalled. Now, here's the thing: Will Anderson can bulk up. He can gain more muscle. He could get through these guys, maybe. That's absolutely a possibility. And I think it's a much better possibility than Tyree does of learning all the tools that Will has. And I don't think, and I want to be clear about this, I don't think he's going to be neutralized in the NFL. I think he's going to get sacks. I think he's going to be a good player. But I don't think he has the upside of the three guys I have ahead of him because I think a lot like Bryce Young, he's being held back by his size and who he is and what strength he has in his arms.
Okay, so you're telling me, honest to God, if you're an NFL GM and somehow, some way, Will Anderson and Kalijah Kancey are both on the board.
I am telling you this.
And you're in the top 10. You're taking Kalijah Kancey over 100%. Will Anderson. Incredible. And for the record, I think it's really stupid. Just incredible.
I'm totally fine with you thinking that's stupid.
I think Will Anderson could very well be the next Khalil
Mack. Oh, come on. Did you ever... Khalil Mack.
Okay. So for the record, I found the stat on Deonte Banks, by the way, that I wanted to find. It's from the Shaving Points podcast, which is run by a guy that I referenced last week, at Butkus Stats, Quentin. Good dude. Listener to the pod, so hi, Quentin. I'm shouting you out again, buddy. Statistically, Deonte Banks allowed 50 catches on 102 targets, 49%, for 557 yards across 28 games, 23 starts at Maryland. That is 1.8 catches for 20 yards per game over his.
That's very good. That's very good, man.
Good. That's very good, Travis.
I don't disagree about the stats, and I mean the stats are what got him there, and obviously he has the size.
The stats.
Obviously he had the size, but I mean, like we've talked about it. What did you say about the quarterbacks? What's the quote you always give me about the quarterbacks? You can tell if a guy is going to suck, but you can't tell by the stats if he's going to be good in the NFL, right?
Okay. So you're saying the stats lie,
Not every time. I mean, I know why he's there. I know why he's up there. That's why we're talking about him right now. But yeah, when I watch Kalijah Kancey and then I watch Will Anderson, I go, one of these guys looks like a superstar, and the other guy looks like sometimes he just gets fucked up. But it's not every time. Now, if he runs up against the guy who he can beat, who he can bull rush, Will Anderson is an absolute nightmare. That's why he gets all these sacks. These are not fraudulent sacks. What I'm saying is he's going to struggle against NFL talent if they have more strength than he does, if they can just basically ignore his bull rush. But if they can't, if he does gain like 10 pounds of muscle and he knows how to use it, then I'm going to look like a fucking idiot, which is fine. I will accept looking like a fucking idiot, but that's my concern about Will. Now, to be fair, again, I'm not saying take Tyree over him. I'm saying the three guys ahead of him I think are really good.
You're saying take Kalijah Kancey, which I think for most people is even more controversial. Yeah. I can see why you got there, but wow, that's a lot. That is a lot. And I just want to say as we head out, like I think you're I really do. That's dumb. That's dumb.
What do you think of Will Anderson? There's not a lot. Give me your take on Will Anderson. You just said he's going to look like the next Khalil Mack, which is fucking stupid, but yeah.
I think he's good. I think my take on Will Anderson is that he's good. The guy with a bajillion sacks the last 2 years is good. He can play football.
I mean, again, I'm not saying... This is how the Justin Herbert take got taken out of context. I'm saying I think he's the fourth best defensive end here.
You called the
fourth best defensive lineman in the draft.
The Justin Herbert thing did not get taken out of context. You called him mid before you'd even really watched the guy. And I told you that was a really stupid take. So I didn't take shit. All right,
it got taken in context. All right, but there's a whole lot of other story about you shoving Justin Herbert down my throat that goes into it. All right, just the same with this Will Anderson thing. I want to be clear. I think he can be a Pro Bowler. I think he can be very successful in the NFL. I think he's missing something. The three guys ahead of him are not. I just don't. I think there's a chance that he fails.
Okay, wait. And the three guys that you have ahead of Will Anderson are Carter, Cansey, and who? Wait, who?
Nolan Smith would be number 3.
Oh, you went there.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you know who else had Will Anderson as like the 4th or 5th?
Oh, I saw that thing
in this draft. Mr. Chris Sims. So how do you feel being in the same? You are in the tape neighborhood.
Who else was up there?
With Mr. Raised in a laissez-faire environment himself. And I mean, let's face it, you were raised in a laissez-faire environment. Were you not, sir?
I'm raised all up in a laissez-faire environment. But now tell me who else Chris Sims had in that list, because that was a funny-ass list.
No, it's not the same list that you had, but I mean, I think if I put your list on Twitter and anyone knew who the fuck you were, you'd get.
Here's what I think.
It's a special brain you got going on here. So your ranking of defensive linemen, period, in this draft. It starts with Jalen Carter, it goes to Kalijah Cansey, it's Nolan Smith, and
that's my ranking. Here's what I think I've found as we've gone through all these positions. We've done this exercise over the last several weeks. Is that, I mean, it's the same thing with Tony Richardson. I think if I'm drafting in the top 10, I'm betting on, explosive traits. I'm hoping to hit a home run, right? And I think Will Anderson is very safe, like Bryce Young. But if there's a guy who I think has a couple more explosive traits, who could be an all-pro level dude ahead of him, I think that's what I would take. I think that's what I'm learning about myself.
Okay, but that's an interesting take when we have shot down Van Ness and Wilson, because I think people would argue that those guys are the traits guys. They got the traits. So what is it that distinguishes a Cansey's traits or a Nolan Smith's, from a Cansey's traits from a Tyree's traits?
It's the seeing them use them, right? It's Van Ness didn't show that he could use them. It's Tyree hasn't shown that he can do the things you're projecting him to do, right? Cansey, Nolan Smith, Jalen Carter, I've seen them use all of those traits that are on the card, right? I've seen them use the RAS score actually in action, and I've seen Will Anderson do it too. I don't want to bury Will Anderson here. I just think those three guys ahead of him, they are bigger home run swings to me.
Interesting. Wow. We're gonna go out on that one because I do think it's a dumb take, and I hope years from now, after his 5th Pro Bowl appearance, fans of the pod are still dumping on Travis for being a Will Anderson doubter.
Not real. I mean, again,
Also, I mean, if you're people that are good at slicing video or whatever, and you want to tweet at me a video of Will Anderson just winning bull rush after bull rush, I bet it's out there. To shove at him too. I'll make sure he sees it. I know he's not on Twitter, but I'll get it to him, folks. So yeah, I think that's a great place to end tonight with some takeage. You fired it off. Will Anderson, your 4th ranked defensive lineman in the 2020.
You're gonna pretend 3 years from now you're gonna be you said he would suck, and I didn't say that. I want to make it clear. I don't think he'll suck. I think the other guys have a better chance of being crazy all-pro dudes you'd give just massive deals to than Will Anderson. I still think I would take him in the top 10. The other 3 guys were gone. I don't fucking like most of the other people in the top 10 of this draft, so maybe he'd still be in my top 10, Kyle.
It's an incredible. That's something. It's something. I asked for takes, and
buddy, I provide.
You did.
I can't wait for the tweets. Wow. God damn it! You're gonna send me so many tweets.
I am. I want them to
hell.
So please, people, if you're listening to this and you're like, "Wow, Kyle's really paired up with me," by God, let me see it because that's 20 years I've been seeking this kind of validation, people.
Next week, we get to talk about the Bears draft.
The table's set. We have gone away from Bears exclusive for a couple of weeks. We wanted to broaden our horizons. We wanted the people to know that this is not going to be solely a Bears podcast, but it is primarily a Bears podcast, and we've set the table. We've gone through what this draft seems to offer, and then next week we'll come in here. We're going to say, here's what the Bears should do: pick 9, pick 53, pick 61. We're going to go through. We're probably not going to go all the way into the 7th round because Travis and I have a stance that's the 5th, 6th, 7th rounds.
There was a guy who was supposed to be going in the 6th who is fast moving up boards who we're going to talk. Guys, I've watched so much offensive line tape. I'm so ready to fucking talk. I'm so tired of watching offensive linemen.
Who's the Will Anderson of the offensive line, Travis? Who's the guy that everyone thinks is good that you're here to tell me isn't?
That's it. You know what? I'm going to tease you. I definitely have a guy for next week. I'm going to tease you on it. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's a good place to leave it then. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Good night, and we'll see you next week when it comes time to tell Ryan Poles how to do his job again. So,
see
all right, good night.